welcome all of you into our what's supposed to be our monthly meeting, but it turns to a webinar. I'm lucky to be co-chair of this immigrant justice group with Sarah. When I joined, one of what I said I wanted to do was to reach the community across the world. Like, we want to bring a lot of people from the international community into this space so we can consolidate and talk about what is going on around the world. So we're lucky to be hosting this today and having this space. My co-chair that you all know very well, but for what it is worth, since there's a lot of international people, I'll let her introduce herself and I'll take it back and introduce our panelists. Sarah.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mashoud, and thanks everyone for being here and for coordinating this fantastic panel. Sarah Buckingham, I'm a faculty member at the University of Alaska Anchorage in our Clinical Community Psychology PhD program. I have been so thankful to be working with Mashoud this past year and Kevin before, Mashoud, and of course Fabrizio for helping to start this group way back. Feels like it's been a while now. It's been what, 4 or 5 years. So really thrilled to have folks here today and really looking forward to this conversation together.
Thank you, Sarah. I believe towards the end of my PhD, Dr. Brad Olson introduced me to Francesca, Dora. We were supposed to, I believe we were presenting on, we were attending a conference in, they wanted to attend a conference in Europe. And so Brad pulled me in, and that's how I met this group. And we've called ourselves CP Immigrant Justice since then. We don't have, but we've checked in on WhatsApp with each other politically, all of the theories and what is going on, around the world. We share content, and everybody says this is what is going on. So because of that relationship, we've gone to a couple of conferences, and because we all have sort of critical orientation to how we approach immigration. So when I was discussing with Sarah that we wanted to do a webinar, we thought this group is the best group to first kind of bring into the webinar space. So I'll sort of let Brad introduce the group because he has more idea of what we're trying to do with the group. So Brad, please introduce everyone, including yourself. Thank you.
Sure. And so I'll let all of the panelists kind of introduce themselves more fully when and it'd be nice if they could start with a little bit of their story of how they kind of got interested in this issue. But I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what I think we all see this group. So and for those of you who are new, SCRA and our immigrant justice group, our interest group that Sarah and Mashoud are now co-leading, and that quite a few of you are part of. I mean, that is such a great group, and proud to be that as well. But we do have kind of this a little bit more global group who are going to be kind of discussing some of the major issues. And I think one of the most important things is we all are kind of we're all obviously upset about the beliefs and norms of the global North when it comes to immigration and migration issues. And some of us, I think Dora and maybe Francesca initially pushed this. We sometimes just refer to, rather than getting all the stigmatizing language about refugees and migration, just talk about people on the move. And we definitely believe in the right for anyone to travel where they wish and live where they wish. And I mean, in some ways, we might be seen as a little bit radical and critical, but kind of what goes along with critical community psychology is a sense of optimism and hope that things can change. And I'm going to put up a theoretical model of praxis that I've been working on with my Montreal colleagues, and just kind of talk a little bit about how, as community psychologists, one kind of model of how we sort of enter this world. This was a model built on critical realism and this idea that sometimes social constructivism, the idea that everything's just decided upon by human beings and perceived by human beings has gone a little bit too far away from the science. And critical realism does kind of embrace that even if it's contextual, even if it's shifting, that there are some truths out there. And this idea of whenever we community psychologists, or as Dora is an anthropologist, we're working on these immigration issues, and we're thinking about what is happening in the global north. And my first entry was to working on this issue was just the sort of visceral experience of Trump separating children from their parents and detaining both, and oftentimes separately, and thinking about everything we know of in psychology about attachment theory, and there's just that these deterrence theories are just so harmful, but that we do care about theories, and we care about the literature and scientific knowledge and collecting data, and we do feel like those resources are a way to kind of get a little bit of an understanding into this truth. But as in all community psychology, we're also embracing ethics and values and seeing that as, in a very pragmatic way, as essential to understanding truth. But that community expertise is, whether we call it indigenous knowledge, in this case, people on the moves, their beliefs and wishes and self-determination, we're always, that needs to be at the forefront. And we may offer some ideas, but this is absolutely equally valuable, and sometimes more valuable in terms of understanding some type of solutions. I mean, whenever we enter a community, there are, first I put problems. We enter with, trying to solve problems, but there are community strengths and hopes. And so we come in with that asset-based approach, hoping that we community psychologists have something to add to help shifting the system to meet those hopes. But there's all kinds of contextual and different concerns, and so it helps us to have these conversations about what's going on in Greece, and what's going on in Hungary, and what's going on at the US border, and what's going on everywhere else in the world. And Mashoud has really pushed us to think about intercontinent migration, and particularly in Africa, and some of the horrors that are going on in Libya and Morocco and Algeria for migrants who are trying to cross that channel. But pushbacks in Greece, all of it. Portugal, and Francesca's in England now, and Mimi, who was a person on the move, who eventually is now, who went through detention on her way to the UK. She couldn't come today. She wasn't feeling well, but usually she joins us. But all of this is the idea that we are moving towards action and collective deliberation about what that truth is, what we're all about. We're all about finding out what's going on the ground and how people are making decisions. And we've got a practical focus. We want to engage in action, and we want to help refugees. We've talked about how do we turn detention camps and totally rethink that in terms of collective forms of places of education and self-driven services, and for the lack of a better word, empowerment. And how do we turn those, get people to think differently and see the value of places that are communities as opposed. And I know Mashoud said, let's not focus everything on Ukraine, but it is kind of an elephant in the room. And as much as I'm pro-Ukrainian and anti-Putin, I mean, we've heard about some of the backlash of the border against Black immigrants. This enthusiasm that we're seeing has not been seen with Syrians and people from Afghanistan, and and we know that racism is involved, and part of the critical community psychology cycles of praxis. I mean, if you think about this all as a fan, and then we try action, and then we go back to the drawing board and we're reflexive, we eventually are also concerned about the nationalist norms against immigration. And we see some of these new developments as maybe this is an opening, maybe this is a hope. So I'm not going to go too long on this, but I just kind of wanted to throw out that model of kind of how I see this group. I don't know if we've been working for 2 or 3 years, but we've been pretty intense. We've been partnering with many activist organizations around the world. And with that said, I don't know, why don't I just turn it over to, how about Francesca Esposito? You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Brad. And yeah, that was a beautiful introduction, and the model was, wow, was amazing. I was really fascinated. And yeah, I want to know more then about this work. And also thank to Sarah and Mushood for like this invitation. It has been a while, but we have been speaking with Mushood about trying to kind of create this opportunity for the two groups like to meet and interact, kind of exchange views and share experiences. And I think we are, I mean, very kind of similar point of views, and yeah, kind of similar work. And yeah, so I think it's really great, and I hope we can like do more things together. I'm conscious of all the like different time zones. It's always difficult to kind of yeah, find a common, yeah. But so what about me? I'm a community psychologist. I've been, I did my PhD in Lisbon with Ornelas and the group of like community psychology there. And Erika is also part of this group, and she's still there in Lisbon, while I now in London. Maybe I'm not sure if temporarily or for how long, but yeah. So I'm Italian myself. I'm a migrant myself, even though this, I think one of the questions also kind of that Mushood share speaks about this kind of who is a migrant, who counts as a migrant. I think this kind of definition and thinking about this, it's really, really, really important. And yeah, and now I'm in London, in the UK. I'm working here in between community psychologists and also working with critical criminologists who have been working a lot on borders and confinement. And there's a whole stream in criminology called border criminology, which is there's a big center in Oxford, and they work a lot on like border control and these border-related forms of incarceration, I would say. About the group. My research has been in particular on immigration detention. So that was the focus of my PhD and like of my current research. And that's when I also got in touch with the other people, including Brad, because I was trying to find people in psychology who would be interested in kind of reflecting on these issues, because I've long reflected around these issues with criminologists or like people with like from critical migration scholars or different disciplines. But actually, I feel like there's a lot to do still in psychology. I think we are a little bit behind in terms of, if compared with other disciplines, which are, I mean, already have a really big field of like body of literature, like working on borders and so I found Brad and I found these other people, and we started to discuss and exchange views on these. And of course we have also, as Brad mentioned, these like people like Aminata, who I met in my own research, who have lived experiences of detention and border control, because we think it's really important to have them in this process, right, to work with them. Yeah, and I think, I don't know, and then maybe I think this is just the first round of introduction, but yeah, I think it's really important. I think it's important to like join forces and really try to push some critical dialogue and thinking in like the psychology field in terms of this issue, because I think it's really urgent. I think I'll stop here. Maybe I spoke already a lot.
No, that was great, Francesca. And how about Dora and then Erica?
Yeah, thank you so much, Brad, and thank you, Moshood and Sarah, for this opportunity to get to meet colleagues and people working on this area. And it's a pleasure to be with this group again. It has been a while, and it's always a pleasure to exchange ideas and to see where are we at this point in time, as we are all doing interesting things. So about me, I'm a psychologist by training, by academic training, and also I have been devoting most of my career to first grassroots community work, and then to humanitarian work. And my journey in humanitarian work brought me to this reality of working with communities on the move, people on the move, displaced communities, migrants, refugees, understanding how these categories are enmeshed and problematic, and how people have been divided through these juridical categories in a way that is more political than actually based on justice. And so this has brought me, after a few years, to developing a PhD in anthropology, which I ended last year, and where I focused mainly on the other side. So what are migrants and refugees doing for themselves already, and how is already civil society and allies from host countries communicating with these activist movements and with these resistance movements. And so I explored from Portugal, from my country, I explored the actions that were being done by Fórum Refúgio, which is an association led by refugees. And I also went to other parts of Europe, like France, Belgium, Sweden, and tried to understand what civil society actors were doing in terms of resistance to the harsh border regime of Europe. And so I tried to amplify these voices and became, in this process, a sort of a research activist, or what I think about as not just a researcher, but actually someone who has a positioning, which is not always easy in academia. But I'm not exactly an academic. I just came to academia after 10 years of field work. So I'm sort of in the middle ground. And so what I'm doing now after the PhD is to continue to connect with these organizations and movements who try to amplify the voices of migrants and refugees. So in particular, I am now collaborating with civil society movement called Europe Must Act, and we are supporting migrants who are detained in refugee camps in Greece, who are increasingly more surveilled and controlled. And at the same time, we are here in Portugal collaborating with Fórum Refúgio, which is this platform of refugee-led associations. And we are writing collaboratively. We are trying as much as possible to bring their voices also into research papers. So we are writing collaboratively about Portugal as a host society. So it's a sort of a reverse anthropology kind of exercise, and it has been exciting to look at things from this perspective, from the opposite perspective. So that's me. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Erika, I'm Italian, so I apologize for my English. I would like to thanks for welcoming me because I never see you on Zoom, so it's the first time, so thank you to all. Yeah, I am a PhD student. I know well Dora, Francesca. As Dora, I started to collaborate with the Forum Refugio, the refugees-led organization. And my project is about community on the move, refugees, people, asylum seekers. And I focus on how services, but also community-based organization support people in their trajectories, in their integration pathways. Basically, is this. Yeah.
Thanks, Erica. Glad to have you. This is the first time, even though you're on our WhatsApp group, this is the first time we're really getting to interact. Mashoud, Sarah, I don't know what direction we want to go in, if we want to just kind of open it up to anyone. I know you also have some questions, so.
Brad, thank you, Brad. Thank you, Erica, because I know it was last minute for you to join us, so thank you for coming. I know I said I don't want us to be about Ukraine, but then the video that was shared with us today in the WhatsApp group, right? I feel like it's something we should. I've seen it. I'm sure everyone here has seen it, but it's very good. It's going to help us with what we're about to do here today. Because for me, the buffet of crisis that is lumped together in what we call refugee, that single word refugee, it's killing me. It's not even helping me to do my work, right? So because we started using the community on the move, which in itself does not even capture all of it, because if you say community on the move, what about the community left behind, right? That we also need to deal with that. So I want to show the video real quick, then we can kind of engage in whoever has a question, or I can read some of the questions that I have written down. So bear with me, I think it's just 2-3 minutes. Can you hear it? Okay.
I mean, you went kind of fast, so we don't know what happens when you actually play, but I'm hearing something. We're not hearing it. Mashoud, could you, when you share, I think you've got to click there's 2 audio buttons. So when you first hit share, click the 2 little open spots, and I think that'll do it.
No problem, but thank you.
Relatively European, I have to choose those words. Relatively civilized.
They look like any European family.
Christians, they're white.
This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
When they say, oh, civilized cities, and in another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world, they really mean white people, don't they?
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
As you're talking to us, Matthew, we're playing in the latest pictures of some of the refugees trying to get on trains or trying to get out of Ukraine. And what's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm looking to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
These are not refugees from Syria. These are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. I mean, that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white.
It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
Some of the media coverage of the conflict in Ukraine has been kind of off. We have reporters and pundits making some rather awful remarks about the nature of this conflict and these refugees versus, say, conflicts and refugees in the Middle East. First off, Europe has been home to some of the worst wars and worst war crimes in human history. I mean, the Holocaust. So why this surprise that bad things are happening in Europe? And second, when they say, oh, civilized cities, and in another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world, they really mean white people, don't they? The reason they seem to want us to care more about Ukraine, and we should care about Ukraine, but not because they're white Europeans. That shouldn't be the reason we care about Ukraine.
Yeah, no, that's what's so disturbing in all of this. And in fact, not only that, it's trying to make an excuse why the West should get involved and embrace these refugees and help them. Listen, let's be clear. You should encourage and actually help refugees because they are fleeing a war. I don't know if you saw this. There was a op-ed today in the Telegraph. I think we have it. We'll put it up for our viewers to see. This was an op-ed in which the writer, Daniel Hannon, said that these people, the Ukrainians, they're like us. They watch Netflix. They have Instagram accounts. They read uncensored newspaper, and then goes on to say that war is no longer something visited upon impoverished and remote population. Oh no, it's happening to us here in Europe.
I'm sorry. I'm sure, you know, we all got the message. The reason why I'm actually sharing that, I shared with the team when we were briefing on, I believe on Wednesday, that a reporter had reached out to me about African students. She wanted to print something in the WTT that, you know, the sweet story is what she said she wants. And I told her, I said, well, everyone in Ukraine that I know is African, especially people that are my company, are not students. There are people that have migrated from different regions in Africa, and they've spent years to get to settle in Ukraine. So they don't even fit the definition of refugee anymore. Now, you want me to tell you that they are all students and that they're all struggling to get back? That's not the story, because I've spoken to people that I said they would rather die in Ukraine. They're not living, but there's nothing to go back to. Right. So that's where I feel like I need to share this in this space, and wherever that conversation goes, the role of media, the role of social media in this case is what I'm trying to talk about. At least that's where I want us to start this discussion. Whoever has something else to contribute to it, because it seems like the message we're getting and the definition of refugee is very selective in this case, right? How do we navigate that as psychologists? Because it's affecting the people we deal with, the people that we're working with, in that sense.
Yeah, this is really important. I'm going to turn it over to maybe we can go in reverse order and hear from Eric or Dora first. But I just wanted to mention that it is the media, but it's also the media is also speaking from human psychology. So even going to the suburb up north and going to visit my mom, she is 89 years old, but the first thing she said was how well dressed the Ukrainians were. So so it's I mean, it's it is a human reaction. There's the proximity, there's also the threat, but it is something that this group has talked a lot about, is this decision of the good or the bad, who deserves to come in and who does not deserve to come in, and how problematic that conversation is. And even like a wonderful program like DACA in the United States, that is trying to help dreamers and work with those who are going to get an education, has, it also creates a sort of divide. But anyways, I was going to pass it over to Dora or Erica to jump in and kind of respond to what you're seeing there.
Rosanna has a hand up, right?
Okay.
Hi, thank you. Oh, let me lower my hand. I'll keep it up and then I'll lower it when I finish. This is very disturbing. I've heard about this and I posted it to the listserv that Brad is also on. I don't know if any of you are. I think this is an interdisciplinary group. No, everyone's talking about the Ukraine on this listserv. Nobody mentioned the Black people that were being turned away and to go to the back of the line. Nobody's talking about it. It's really troubling, disturbing to me. So I posted 2 different posts about this. This is anti-Blackness and Afro-pessimism on blast right now. People think that racism, or it's not isolated in the United States, it's global. Anti-racism, anti-Blackness and Afro-pessimism is a collective unconscious contract, where people are just conditioned. I'm just disturbed by the media. I don't actually own a TV, so I haven't actually watched this footage before. And when I say anti-Blackness, I'm not just talking about Black people. I'm talking about, if you can think of whiteness and Blackness on a spectrum, where on the spectrum, immigrants who are non-white, people who are from the Middle East, people who are indigenous are in that spectrum of Blackness. Anti-Blackness to me is essentially what is going on at the border in the Ukraine. I'll shut up now. Hello. Lower my hand. How do I lower my hand? Okay.
Thank you. And I don't know, Dora?
Sure. Yeah, it is indeed difficult to watch this and to try and make sense of it, particularly when you are working alongside refugees who have been mistreated, refugees who are detained, people around the globe who are struggling with a really increasingly harsh, that has become even harsher during the pandemic, border regime. So we witness as countries like Poland, Hungary, Slovenia, Slovakia are now opening the doors to millions of refugees without even hesitating, right? And at the same time, we know that a month before, we were collecting testimonies of people who were being beaten in the border of Poland and Belarus, right? And we also know that we have xenophobic policies actively pushing back migrants coming into Hungary and other countries in Eastern Europe. And it's not just Eastern Europe. We know that we have an organized border regime that systematically has been pushing away Black and brown bodies and making sure that we keep the continent of Europe safe, the borders safe, and we prioritize border safety so much that we pay militias in Libya to maintain migrants at bay. And we know that this will implicate an increasing number of deaths in the sea, in the journeys to Europe. So it's quite difficult knowing all this and now witnessing the emotion that has been driven as well by the media and by all the civil society movements who came closer to the border of Poland and started to exhibit their generosity, but in a way that I find a bit exaggerated, in a way that I believe is driven by emotion mostly and exacerbated by emotion. And my fear is that we don't take some steps in terms of driving this emotion positively, because there are some things that I believe we can do to then now advocate for the rights of all refugees equally, right? Because we are seeing as institutions are opening up different procedures for Ukrainian refugees to easily have their paperwork and easily get integrated. And if we see this, we can also have now more space to say, okay, if you are doing this for Ukrainian refugees, then you have to offer it to all refugees equally, because that's how we work in democracy, right? So I believe that this will open at least a space and an opportunity, and this is the optimist side of us now advocating and making sure that we open more avenues for alternatives of solidarity, alternatives for activism, and alternatives for refugee rights and immigrants' rights to be respected. I'll shut up for now.
Francesca, Erica, anybody else? Erica,
yeah. Anyone?
Okay, I can say something. No, this is very uncomfortable, and seems to me that these people who are not white are supposed to suffer. So the sufferance of the people is legitimized, and this is very dangerous. But during my field work, people in refugee situation tell me that feeling refugees make them feel not normal, and they want to feel normal. And watching this kind of sentence, this kind of words make sense, because it seems that refugees, not white, not Ukrainian, are different, like are not so human, are not so. This is very strange. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know what to say exactly, but
no, yes, it is about dehumanization and
dehumanization, animalization, like almost animalization, like they are not people, they are different. So this is, but this is, and this means a lot of ignorance of what like people coming in Portugal that are who are asylum resettled are very high qualified people. So this narrative that doesn't make sense, because looks like people don't know who these people are. And with this war in Ukraine, I thought, oh, let me pass this expression, but oh, good, maybe in this way all the world can understand that everyone can be in danger, everyone can be refugees. So refugees is not so far as label. Am I clear what I want to say? So I thought that these make people more empathy feel more empathy to refugees, because it's something that can happen to everyone. And but it's not like this, it's the opposite. Make people feel even more far, even more distant. I don't know if I'm clear, but
You are, Eric.
Erica, you are. Thank you.
Can I
Fabrizio?
jump in, Moshood?
No, Fabrizio has his hand up. Francesca. Fabrizio.
Yes.
Just have a quick question. Since you remember last year, we have thousands, maybe 14, 12,000 Haitians under a bridge. Remember, in the bridge between Mexico and the United States, they were all black. Do you know what happened? I know that they got rid of them, but because they were black, what was the treatment? Were they treated differently from the usual immigrants from Central and South America? Or I don't know what happened. I'm just asking because you are bringing the issue of race. And I think that we just experienced as a country that whole situation. There were 14,000 of Haitians under that bridge.
Right, and most of them had come already had traveled over to Colombia and other places in South America, and then migrated up. And then I believe many, I don't know if all, were flown back to Haiti, where they originally left. But yeah, I mean, as Dora said, you know, I mean, under any definition of democracy, we've got to believe in equality, and that is absolutely not happening. But Francesca, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think I'll try to shift a little bit the focus. I think, I mean, of course, I agree with what you said, but I might be a little bit unpopular, but I was not very surprised by this kind of rhetoric or, you know, media kind of approach. One of the things that I noticed over the years of my work in detention, and this was particularly evident during the COVID-19 pandemic, was like these hierarchies of suffering, of vulnerability, some scholars such as Ruth Gilmore call the politics of innocence, right? So we have these hierarchies of who deserves, who does not deserve, who is more innocent, who is, and there's always, I mean, all the time that you kind of, you know, adopts this rhetoric, there's always someone who's included at the expense of someone else who's excluded, right? So, I mean, it's not new. I've seen this for a very long time. People in detention centers are always like left behind, are among those excluded usually. That's why I think, and I want to go back to what we said at the beginning, and one of the questions that you, Moshood, and Sarah kind of suggested, I think it's really important about thinking who is a migrant, who counts as a migrant, who is a refugee, who counts as a refugee, because what I came to realize in my experience is how these categories are constantly produced and reproduced, and they reify specific subjects. Okay, so actually, who is a migrant is, I think, is the result of like immigration law and regulations and a set of kind of technologies and mechanisms who produce someone as a migrant. I give a very clear example based on my own experience. I used to work a lot, as I said, to work as an advocate, researcher, activist in detention settings. So I first started in Rome, like 2008, I think, entering with a feminist NGO. We used to go in the women section of the center to like provide legal information to the women detained in there. And I very often met Roma women who, some of them were born and raised in Italy. I once met a woman, 18 years old. She was from Morocco, and she was more Italian than I mean, I was the migrant if compared to her. She had never left Italy. She was born and raised in Italy, but she was in immigration detention center. So she was, was she a migrant? Officially, she was labeled as a migrant. So what I'm trying to say here, that, again, I think here it's important to think at how how these categories are built and used. And so maybe shift the focus from like the migrant to how we produce who is a migrant. Now, what are the like mechanisms at place that result in producing some subjectivities as, to label them? Because of course, she didn't identify as a migrant. She was an Italian. She was an Italian. The problem there was that she was not recognized, was not acknowledged as an Italian because of Italian nationality law, which is based on ius sanguinis rather than ius solis. So people who are born and raised in Italy by foreign national parents are not recognized as Italians, which is not the case in the United States, but for example, is the case in Italy, is the case in Portugal, is the case in the UK, so in many countries in the world. So yeah, I think that's just, so all the time like these, for example, yeah, we speak about refugees, but who is the refugees? And you were very rightly asking in the question, we should like, is this like the use of this, of asylum or refugee? I think is increasingly an exclusionary use of this kind of tool. And we kind of, we include a very little few who deserve protection in order to exclude the most. And there's this very interesting book. It's written by a geographer, Alison Month, which is called The Death of Asylum, because basically she describes all the history of asylum, and she's saying how basically we are witnessing the death of asylum, because we're witnessing today, it's not asylum anymore. It has all been completely dismantled, the principles and ideas. So I don't know, strategically, I don't know if we should still try to rely and fix these broken kind of structures. And I don't know, don't want to be too pessimistic. Maybe there are other ways. Maybe we should, I think, rethink everything.
Well, there is the critical negative there, but there's also the possibility of seeing that as a lever for change, because these asylum laws are built on human rights and they're built on treaties, which treaties are the land of the law in these countries that have agreed to these treaties. And I don't think there's been enough pushback to say, no, you can't get rid of asylum. But they certainly have tried.
Thank you, Francesca and Brad, and thanks for everyone contributing in the chat window as well. I want to name, if folks want to speak points aloud, please feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, Mashoud is kind of deferring to panelists in this space, but we welcome contributions. Yeah, I see Yolanda's hand raised.
All of this conversation brings back to me the importance of critical race theory. One of the key tenets of critical race theory is that racism is normalized. And the atrocities we're seeing on how we treat, of course, we acknowledge the pain of people of Ukrainian and been supporting them, but we of course acknowledge what we saw in the video. And that's part of normalizing racism. And this is not new, it's been historical and globally. Countries, especially European countries, preferences in visa numbers, in visa types, permissions have always been favored to white people coming from white countries and not to Black, indigenous, brown people. So this is unfortunate, but it's not new. and it's also, and I want to bring, one of my points that I was going to bring up relates to Joanna's point. There's a paradox and a hypocrisy here, as Joanna said, because many of these nations did sign the United Nations Convention on Refugees. And I think the last one was, at least when the agreement came up, I think it was 1960 something. And since then, even after the last agreement of the rights of refugees, all the European countries and the United States have violated the rights of refugees coming from countries of people of color and countries from limited resources. This is historical, it's happening, and it just links with the critical race theory. So I think that it's important as community psychologists to make connection with the other movements that are going on, like let's push back critical race theory. These are examples of normalizing racism, but also highlighting the fact that there's a violation of rights, of human rights and social justice rights that these countries themselves have signed to protect. Because according to the last convention, refugees are allowed, no matter where they're coming from, just the fact that they are fleeing and forced to leave, that they should be allowed for a series of protections that you probably know better than I do. But I think we can call attention in our advocacy that these rights are being violated, because the essence at the bottom of that is we're normalizing racism. And by the many dangers, as we know, of normalizing racism, but one of the big ones is what we see, and we see in the literature, justified violence. They're breaking the law. So violence is justified. And that's what we saw with Black, Haitian immigrants being hit when they were crossing, because it justifies. So I think we need to go back to that link to the dangers of normalizing racism. It justifies violence and violation of people's human rights and refugee rights.
Dora, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak on that, Yolanda, around the idea of normalizing racism. I was remembering one really powerful reading I did during my PhD by a scholar named Barak Kalir from Amsterdam. And I think that he found an interesting terminology to sort of frame the whole asylum system as it was disturbed by these continuous manipulations and redirections of the actual principle of law that was created after World War II. We recreated categories, we made different legal schemes to justify that these migrants will be detained, these ones will be allowed, these ones will be refugees, etc. But the reality of it, he calls it, we have a system of departheid. We have a system that is created to actually expel the bodies that are not white from our neoliberal capitalist system. We use these bodies for exploitation, for labor, for the purposes of maintaining this system, and we expel them when they are not useful. So I think that if we deconstruct the reality as it is, we reach this reality, which is that we live in a state of separation between the global north and the global south. And this idea of calling it departheid, for me, is a starting point to sort of look at alternatives and try to find some more honest confrontations for this reality.
Thank you, Dora. Joanna, sorry. We can hear you, Joanna.
You're muted.
So yeah, okay, good point. Hi, everyone. I guess one point that I wanted to kind of share with you is this feeling of apprehension that I have and of kind of a sick surprise when I look at the pictures on TV of, the Ukrainian people just walking freely through the borders of Poland, and then thinking of the refugees in Idomeni, Greece, who were stuck for months at the border with their kids living under bushes and trees and wet tents. And then people that they're still stuck in the camps in Greece, at the islands, in Athens, outside of Athens. That paradox for me is really hard to digest and make sense of it. How it can be happening, like, in the same continent, few countries apart, this, crazy in a way, and unjustifiable procession or of human souls and human futures, because there are people that are stuck in camps for now like 2 years, and then there are people, they're just it's very unfortunate that the war happened and they have to leave their home, but they can just walk through the border and go to another country. To me, I just feel like we're just sitting back and I'm sitting back and I'm watching it and I'm like, what is happening in the world? There's hypocrisy at every level, including myself, because I'm just sitting here in my safety in my home doing nothing.
Thank you, Joanna. I put sort of a question to guide maybe how we're thinking is. Because we are all psychologists, right? I wrote something with Brad recently, a call to action for psychologists, right? Specifically saying, please look at what is happening to Black migrants. And this is where we are now. This was written before Ukraine happened. So here, based on the question that I just put into, because a lot of these places, that some of this system has been affecting people in a way, we're not reaching there. And I think what Francesca has said in the beginning, that psychologists is coming to this game so late, right? In terms of immigration, migration, psychologists have not been we've not been really involved like that, at least from what I'm reading, right? So I wonder if I can ask the question is, what can we do in terms of how can we get this ecology, the way we think in terms of we being psychologists, how can we get this thinking into those hard to reach spaces, in those communities of the world that we know they are doing stuff. Dora does a lot of this resistance with different communities in the world. So maybe she should lead in this area if she understands what I'm saying, right? Am I coming clear to you, Dora?
Yeah, I think that the key lies on trying to reimagine different solidarity, and trying to drive this positive, empathy towards refugees, which I think, empathy is good. It's great that it's there. It's great that people are moved by the realities of other people's suffering. But I do think that this empathy has to be guided and has to be, has to be supported by movements that provide access to more information and also to the realities of asylum and of migration. And so it's important to give the stage and give the power to the communities themselves so that they can have access to advocate for their rights so that we can amplify these voices, and we can make, as much as possible, as refugees come to a host society, we can make them autonomous and able to speak for themselves. And, you know, just to give you an example of something that we can do now, there is a group of migrants that has been in protest for more than 100 days in Libya, trying to, in front of UNHCR, in front of the door, trying to claim that, you know, we did nothing to be in these inhumane conditions. We are at the doors of Europe. We don't think that it is human for us to be in these conditions. We want people to look at us. And so this month is actually a month where we, a lot of activists are trying to amplify their voices, and it's a good opportunity for us to also acknowledge that these are Black migrants that are not allowed to access the same privileges as other refugees that we are welcoming with open arms. So it's important to really make room for these voices and to really make space for these kinds of movements to be the ones who drive solidarity and be the ones who inform about what migrants and refugees need, rather than us being driven just by the emotions and the mediatic images and the institutions who are very biased in terms of you know, who they care for and who they support.
Just to build off of what Dora is saying, but first, so when I look at this question, and it comes to mind that Francesca's dissertation on this topic was used Jim Kelly's ecological theory, so she might have something to say. But and which, by the way, I might add, won the Scrod Dissertation Award. I mean, we have a long tradition in community psychology, whether it's people with lived experience with mental health struggles, in Fairweather's model of being able to create settings and live in lodges that are collectively run rather than run by health professionals or run by the government, or Oxford House for people recovering from substance abuse and having no professionals there. I mean, there are many ways that community psychologists can help people re-envision what are best practices for self-determination and empowerment. So, you know, migrant-run settings and communities. And Dora's been looking at, has a number of examples, and oftentimes, and when we're talking about not just organizational, but we're talking about, I mean, Mashoud's questions about the ecological component. I mean, there are many forces that for some reason see those manifestations, those open, community-driven settings as a threat. And the outside forces try to destroy them, much as Saracen's book, The Creation of Settings in a Future Societies. There are always these external threats. Sometimes those threats come because it's a new innovation, and that's an implicit critique of what's occurring. But for some bureaucratic authoritarians, it's just these models are a threat. And but we need more of them, and we need to study them, and we need to kind of try to encourage people to see why this is a long-term advantage for everyone if we create these spaces. So yeah, I'll let others jump in.
I wanted to just share what Noe had shared in the chat, and I wonder if Noe, if you want to jump in and share some yourself too, because I think your points about climate change and destruction of ecologies are really important ones. And I don't know if you want to share more, Lab.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate everyone and, everybody sharing, creating the space for conversation and, new insights and thinking about these issues that are very complex. And I think, yeah, I mean, what you mentioned about, ecological systems, and then thinking of how, the different systems create the conditions that disrupt the natural ecological systems, which basically then lead to the conditions where you're seeing a lot of change around the world, and people that did not contribute to those kinds of changes are the ones that unfortunately are largely being harmed, and then because of what's happening, then they are pushed to having to pursue their livelihoods and survival in other places. And I think like you're saying, the invisibility and I think we're going to see that if climate change, and it seems like unfortunately that's just gonna continue getting worse because people are not really taking action, unfortunately. So and then now I think the world is gonna realize, right, the other people that what's sort of what we're talking about with Ukraine, that other populations that before were not seeing having those experiences of having to feel like, okay, being pushed out, it's going to be happening to other people around the world, in places where people didn't imagine that those changes were going to happen, and then you're going to see a mass kind of migration of peoples throughout the planet, and realizing, yeah, we're all interconnected. That this is, for a long time, we were creating all these categories and dividing each other, but now we're facing this problem. Everyone's being affected, but I feel like it's going to be too late. Like it's just going to be, and not to be pessimistic, but anyways, like it, and this is largely done by those forces in power that also contribute to creating the policies and the pressure on governments to whether they are open to people coming from other countries into the borders. And but anyways, I don't know if I'm now making sense, but I just wanted to share that thought of how what we're discussing is happening within this broader context where we're seeing all these changes happening, and what are the implications of that as we're doing the work, that it's just layer upon layer of complexity that I feel that it's something that we're confronting.
Thank you, Neo. The layers and the complexity makes it difficult to follow. So we can, from time to time, there's a rollover of crisis, and we can't even follow through with what is going on, right? And one thing that I've noticed working with, say, resettled refugee on ground here is, because of the traumas that people have faced coming into the Western environment, once people get here, a lot of people don't even want to participate anymore. They want to absorb of anything to do with refugee, migrant, and in a way that's actually adding more to the crisis, because in a way we say we want to amplify their voice, but when they're not ready to join the fight, it creates. So I'm speaking for people that are not ready to speak for themselves. It creates some kind of disconnect in that kind of advocacy. Joanna, do you still have your hand up, or was that before? You're muted.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to say something to continue to the point from the previous speaker. It's very interesting how after World War II, the term refugee has been criminalized more and more. So instead of looking at the invader, right, as the actual criminal, and all these other forces that are sitting back and watching what's going on, they're part of the criminal body. We make the refugee, being the criminal, the one who is coming from somewhere else to come into our community or our country, where in reality he's not the criminal. And how this system is being used effectively to promote anti-immigration, racism, differentiation, and policies that actually, prevent people from, basically be able to defend their political right.
Francesca?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. It's a very complex, I think, but important as well conversation. I mean, what Noé, I think, I don't know if I'm mispronouncing the name, but was saying about the crisis and this common crisis and how we can build on that in order to kind of feel this sense of connection, right? I think that was my hope when the COVID-19 pandemic started. I thought maybe this could be an opportunity, of like amplifying this sense of interconnectedness amongst us. But I mean, as we all know, things didn't actually go in that way. So it turned out that it actually amplified existing disparities and inequalities and whatever. But still, I mean, I still think that like there's still this possibility. So all the time, and that's my thinking even now in this situation with Ukraine, I think that, I mean, it's a situation in which, of course, of some crisis, maybe we can kind of channel this to open to new opportunities, right? I mean, I think all the time we have a crisis, it can go both ways. It depends how we are able to channel kind of energies, and that's not easy because, of course, we are speaking about, yes, such complex issues and phenomena. But one other thing, but I mean, I think there's this possibility of kind of amplifying these solidarities, bottom-up forms of solidarities in order to like expanding them. And that's one point. The other point, I think, which I'm thinking around this, this has to do with something which happened in Glasgow. I think it was May, June 2021, so like past year. I don't know if you kind of in the United States, you kind of, this was, I mean, was echoed there or not, but there was this episode of two Indian guys who were taken by deportation officers, immigration officers, very early morning in order to be deported, taken to the airport and be deported. And like the people there in the neighborhood saw what was happening and they started to message each other and go in the street. And very rapidly, a lot of people were in the streets and they blocked the van because there were like hundreds of people and people coming. They blocked the van, and one guy even went behind, like under the van. And so basically, like the home office, the people, the immigration officers couldn't drive the van because there were too many people and children and families. And, you know, there was even one person behind the van, so they could have killed him. And at some point, they remained there for 8 hours, to the point that the home office had to give like the communication that the two guys had to be released. And it was extremely powerful. And the kind of things, the slogans, the chants were like, they are our neighbors. We don't accept police brutality in our neighborhood. They are our neighborhoods. So you have to let them free. And I think that's so powerful. That was really, really, really a peak in the kind of the spirit of the movement, I guess, because it was really a big success. But what I think it's my main takeaways from this, it's like, I think like community psychologists like us are very well positioned to kind of build, and as we have always done, this, you know, sense of community and bonding and connections. And maybe we should really start to work like on these issues without leaving behind these like refugee, migrant, whatever, and try to amplify all the kind of categories. Maybe we can, for example, use the category of the neighbors, or like the, I don't know, other kind of categories that we can use to kind of create these bonds and sense of shared humanity and connections, so that people feel like, gosh, we're not deporting the migrant, we're not detaining the refugee, they're deporting and detaining my neighbor, you know, I mean, it's my friend, it's my schoolmate, and I don't accept this. So I don't know, these are just some reflections.
So yeah, Dora put it in the, I showed that, I mean, that was a lot of people in Glasgow, and Dora shared the link. I mean, but that is very much community level. I mean, that's very much in our domain. And all of us, or most of us, I'm sure know Gina Langhout, who's part of our immigrant justice interest group. And Gina has done a lot of studies in the United States around studies. She's been giving workshops and paying close attention to this occurring in the US. So when ICE, Immigration, Customs and Enforcement officers, come to try and detain someone, that the neighbors, not only the neighbors, but they have networks and websites so that people race to the site and make it very difficult for that, for the person to be detained. And I mean, yeah, I think that's super important. And whatever level we're talking about, it is trying to get people to get over these in-group, out-group ways of thinking. One of the point, we all also know Serdar, and Serdar really emphasizes in his own life experience too, just what it means to not have the rights and the laws apply to one as someone who's in a different country, and all of the protections that we have that are such, you know, privileges to us in our countries. People who have migrated don't have those same protections. And I mean, it's really, really terrifying. And so, but I think everything that we're talking about, kind of in a Brofenbrenian sense, we need to get people to think more universally. We need to get people to think of all people as being part of one of the lines in an immigration paper. There was anger at the Belarus-Poland border of someone still, you know, families stuck and freezing in the forest, and someone who went through that experience saw what was happening in Ukraine and said, you know, we all bleed the same. And I thought that was powerful. But we do need to try to push people to see things more in terms of universality. And this is what Dora brought up with human rights. I mean, the post-World War II conception of human rights was that all human beings possess these rights, and they cannot be violated. And but the laws do switch to become de-apartheid, and as Dora pointed out, and all kinds of other legal machinations that I think we as community psychologists are in a good position to challenge.
So we barely have maybe 7 minutes. So I'm leaving it open for anyone to raise any question, comment, you know, what we even need to talk about in the future, you know.
I see Joanna's hand is up. I can go after you if you have a comment.
I think go ahead, Dr. Tanya. I think her hand has been up.
Okay, well, I'd just like to thank you for having this event today. It's been very informative. I was thinking, what's going on with Black people in Ukraine? I haven't seen them in the news. I haven't seen any media reports regarding them. I know that the situation with refugees and migrants have not been great in the past. So I could only imagine what's happening currently. I saw a couple of news reports. One was about some military, Black military men who were fighting and indicated that they are going to fight until the end to support Ukraine. And after that, they're going to deal with the racism issue. I saw another report that talked about some Black Christians who were, praying and worshiping in their way and saying that they're supporting Ukraine in that way. But I think that there has been a seismic shift in what we know about this refugee and migrant situation, and it typically being focused on brown and Black individuals. With this situation in Ukraine, if you saw the news report of the white elderly man who went out to get bread for his partner and was killed, that made me feel like this situation has changed worldwide and globally. That even, as we stated earlier, this has been changed. The white people, they have the nice outfits and everything, and they are different. This is different. Well, certainly it is different, because this man didn't even get a chance to be a refugee or a migrant and to try and go somewhere else, because they have this rule that I believe 18 to 65-year-old men cannot even leave Ukraine. So they can't even get to that point. And this could happen anywhere in the world. It could happen here in America. Somebody could come and say, hey, we have war against you, and we're trying to run to Canada or some other place. I just wanted to say thank you for sort of highlighting what is happening. This has been, educational for me, but it looks like the future is pretty grim, but we have to get together and make some changes as community psychologists and community psychology researchers.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. No, it's right. So the Ukrainians have a policy that the men cannot leave, and many are staying, and many have tried to flee. And so there were a group of Nigerian students who were trying to leave, and one of the men who did make it to Poland from Nigeria was saying that they were told they could not go on the train, and only women and children. And he said, well, what about, we have Nigerian women here. And they're like, where? And pointed out and said, they actually had to use threats and force to get those women on the same train as the white Ukrainian women. So it's revealing some of the best of humanity, but also some of the same old worst things of humanity.
What I see and what I think needs to change is, every time they said the African migrant, they said student. I've spoken to a couple of people that are not students at all, and I'm emphasizing that. And then nobody is saying or speaking to that. People that have migrated for years to get to where they've lost everything. We're not talking about them, and they find it hard to go back. They don't even have a home. They are stateless in that case, So it makes it difficult for people like them, and they don't belong to all of the categories we've put on the ground in terms of refugee or asylee and all of that. So them are more concerned. People that I've spoken to, I can't even get in contact with them anymore. In the first week of the war, when I spoke to them, I don't know if they are okay. I don't know what has happened to them. It's hard to track. But whatever the case is, we'll keep doing the good work. So thank you all. I think we only have 1 minute left, if I'm correct by the time. So thank you all for coming. We'll try to do something again, and we'll invite you all. This has been such a great contribution from everyone. Thank you. I think we'll share the recording. I don't know how that is done, but I will ask this prior representative that's going